It's now 10:07 a.m. I'd like to call the Castle Hills Ad Hoc Project Committee meeting to order and determine if there is a quorum. At this time, I determine there is a quorum. So let's go ahead and start our meeting. First item of business is welcome. We have a couple of well, first of all, thank you for the members attending. We do have one excused absence. Ms. Hopke had a prior engagement, and she informed us that she cannot attend this meeting. So I just want to let y'all know that. I want to welcome all the members here and our guests that have arrived today, too. Say again, please. Oh, yes, and thank you for bringing that up. Yes, Councilman Gray is also not able to make this meeting, but I know he did have some discussions with Skip, and so he's informed of what we're trying to do here today. Okay, let's go ahead and start our agenda, or move on for our agenda. Second item of business, we review and approve the minutes of the December 7, 2019 meeting. I believe these are the minutes in front of us. Has everyone in this committee had a chance to review the minutes, first of all? Great. So can I get a motion to approve? Okay. A motion by George, second by Jack. Okay. Any discussion on the minutes from the December 7, 2019 meeting? Okay. Thank you. No discussion. All in favor of approving the minutes as written? It's unanimous. Thank you. Item number 3. Let me see here. I'm going to go ahead and adjust like I was telling you, like I was wanting to. We have Shannon McFarland here with us. She is the project's chairman, I guess.
That's what Sharon said.
Okay. The president. She's with the Garden Club. One of the items that we brought up previously is, let me see if I can find the item number, is it's under old business, agenda item number 4, discussion and possible action on discussion and possible action on the follow-up on beautification projects and receive input from the Castle Hills Garden Club. So I'll go ahead and move that item forward, discuss that since Shannon has graciously decided to attend today with us. The reason that at the last meeting, we made a decision to go ahead and reach out to the Garden Club. There was some prior discussion on beautification of our city, and I think one of the items that came up is the monument signs that we have at various entrances and various streets throughout our city. Mr. McCormick brought up about how we can go ahead and beautify those, and the thought process was some sort of plantings that are drought tolerant, and then other agenda items or other items of beautification came up also. What I'd like to do is to go ahead and let the Women's Club have also been discussing this too, as I understand, and I'd like to go ahead and specifically, we would like to involve the Women's Club, if possible, to help with this project along with support of the city too. They do have an annual project that they do for the city. This may be something appropriate for that, but that's obviously going to be in their discussion. We'd like to see if there's something we could do to help out our city. Skip, do you want to go ahead and comment on this point?
I took the trouble to drive around and look at all of the locations that Mr. Hirata provided me where the city does maintenance on these signs. There are only 2 right now, clear signs that advertise the city. One's on Cass Hills at Blanco. The other is on Travertine at Jackson Keller. And in each place, there's a small median in the street where the sign is mounted, and it has lights on it and built-in irrigation lines and so forth. And there's a lot of what is there now appears to be low maintenance, but it's a low hedge type ground cover that covers part of the ground, but it's still pretty rough looking. And what we had thought was that we might want to improve that with some xeriscape type plantings that would require less maintenance, perhaps less water. There are other places where we had hoped to do some signs similar to that. One might be on the island at Northwest Military and Lock Hill, Selma. On the east side of Northwest Military, going northward, there is a triangular island there now that has 2 bus stop seats on it. And that's about all. It's planted in grass, and there's nothing else there. I don't know who owns that. Haven't been able to find out yet, but that's something we need to look at. So that would be a place where we might do it. There are little rounded signs with, in some cases, with the street name on them. The prominent ones are Lemonwood, Carrollwood, and Northwest Military. There are 2 on each side, 2 on Lemonwood side and 2 on the Carrollwood side. And north of that, there is a similar little wall with prints on it on both sides of prints at Northwest Military. Neither one of those is very visible at the moment, and there is some plant installation there in front of those walls. On the Lemonwood side, there is a planter in the wall that has grass, looks like some kind of planting in it, but it grows up above the sign so you can't see it. There are simple posts at Roletto and Caladium on Northwest Military, and on the south side at, not Lundblade, but the two immediately south of Cass Hills on the Blanco intersections there. And there's nothing there but a little, it's Antler's one of them, and the other one is the one right south of Antler. But all that's there is a little, Atwater, yeah, a little short brick wall about maybe 1.5 feet high with no signage on it. And all that's being done there now, I believe, is mowing, and I think there's a good chance that the property owner is doing that. Those are really the only signs that we have that would require maintenance. There is a potential for improvement at the Lemonwood, Carrollwood signs. There's a potential for improvement at the Cass Hills, Travertine, and there's a potential for improvement at the island at Northwest Military and Lock Hill, Selma. So those, the 2 most amenable appears to me to be, the 3 most amenable appear to me to be Travertine and Jackson Keller and the sign at Cass Hills and Blanco. I think there probably is an opportunity to put some signage in elsewhere. We have the recommendation made in 2006 by Texas A&M Municipal Planning to put gateway signs at certain intersections, which would make it apparent that you were entering or leaving Castle Hills. I think those are good ideas, but we don't have anything there now. We'd have to find a place to put them where we have control of the right-of-way and something to put up. And I think signs similar to what we have at Cass Hills and Travertine would be what we'd want to use.
Skip, thank you. Thank you for all the work you put in to find all the various areas of our city that need some improvement in that regard. Now, Shannon, would you like to share some of the thoughts that the Garden Club may have in that at this point?
Well, every year we do.
If you can, we are being streamed live. We'll need you on the mic if that's okay. Yeah. Sorry about being so official in that regard.
And there's an audience of
maybe
thousands.
Yeah.
at least 2 or 3.
Well, every year the Garden Club does a little project for Arbor Day, and we had already discussed planting a tree in the Commons, a Monterey oak or something. Well, I think a Monterey oak is our best choice. Sharon had already researched it, and it grows fast, and it's a good tree, and you don't have to worry about oak wilt. So, but then Sharon said that you all have this committee to beautify Castle Hills, and we would certainly be open to changing our idea about what project we do if you all have a concrete plan as far as the landscaping goes on these monument signs, because really, even xeriscape plants require water at first, and we don't maintain our projects. So that is a consideration. I don't know how much rocks cost, but that's a thought. I'm kind of thinking back on entrances into neighborhoods like Elm Creek seems to do a good job with their plantings, and they don't look like, I'm sure they're not that high maintenance, even though they've got full-time crew that maintain those. There is a planting in front of Hunter's Creek, that's kind of across from Elm Creek, that has a lipstick plant that's beautiful, and it is a xeriscape plant, but I don't know, we're not professional landscapers, so I don't know how much maintenance that requires. But our primary thoughts were that we need to get a professional planner to plan whatever we do on these monuments. That's the main thing, to have a concrete plan, and whether it's done all at once, it probably can't be done all at once. But to do it in smaller increments would be great. And then the garden club maybe could help with that every year and have that be our project. Because I don't know how many trees we can plant in the commons. I don't even know if they want another tree in the commons. But that's just what we came up with initially.
Okay.
So that's just about all I have to say. I just primarily came here today to hear what your ideas are and what you all would really need in the community. Because I think we can all agree that we need some kind of beautification in our community, and it would be nice. It would be nice to have people know where they are when they zip through here 100 times a day, and so.
Perfect. Shannon, thank you for sharing, and I think you hit on a perfect point, is we need to put together a plan. I know Sharon, Sharon is the president of the garden club, and Sharon Paulette, and she said that exact same thing, that we need to have a plan first before we haphazardly move forward on something like this and stuff. And I completely agree with that, honestly. Skip, you had to comment?
It may be in the case of travertine that rocks, as you mentioned, may be the simplest solution to cover up what's there now. There are some low plants, as I said, and there's a great deal of hose, for want of any better word, irrigation hoses laid out that essentially are just clutter on the ground. And so they're relatively unsightly. But what I'm going to suggest is that we do two things. Let's contact Mr. Harada. I'll make a motion that we contact Mr. Harada and Mrs. Montemayor, who was supposed to be the master gardener who has some big experience with xeriscape, and put them in contact with each other to go out and look at a couple of these places, and perhaps to see if a plan is worth doing, or whether what we really want to do is to cover the bare ground, because it's not all that bad as it is, with some kind of rocks just to improve the appearance. And leave that planting at travertine as it is, maybe Cass Hills as well, and see what they recommend. So it may be one of us and those two to go out and look at them and come up with some ideas.
You're talking specifically travertine?
Well, there's travertine and Jackson Keller, okay, and there is Cass Hills and Blanco, okay, where there are two signs already present. The others that have plantings in them now are the ones at Carrollwood and Northwest Military, and Lemonwood and Northwest Military. They have some plantings The one on Lemonwood, the north side on Lemonwood is obscured by the plantings that are growing up in front of it. So I think that's a possible improvement. The signs on Carrollwood side don't have much growing in front of them, but they could have. So those are the other two where we might consider improving existing plantings. There are no plantings where we have entry signs otherwise at Caladium and Roletto on Northwest Military and Atwater and Antler on the south side on Blanco and those two streets, Atwater and Antler. So there's nothing there but a small wall. We could put plantings in if we decided it was worth doing. At present, there's nothing particularly unsightly about them, but there's nothing particularly outstanding about them either.
Skip, I'll second your motion. I have further comment, but we probably ought to see that through.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on that. But.
Suggestion, you can't make a motion.
Skip made it as a motion, right, as an action
Is he on
item.
our board now?
You are correct. Thank you,
I'm not
George.
a member,
Appreciate that.
So somebody else needs to.
Okay, I'll move that Mr. Harada, we put Mr. Harada together with Montemayor to go out and look at those various areas and make suggestions to see if it's feasible to get a more xeriscape type approach planting in those areas.
Okay, great. Thank you, George. And thank you, Jack, too, for that. So let's start with some discussion for that motion. Would you like to go ahead and begin, Bernard?
Sure. The island on Travertine and Jackson Keller, is it Jackson Keller? Yeah, like you said, the drip irrigation, you see it, and it might be where water crosses, I don't know, like, so rocks would be good, so mulch wouldn't just wash away. These are simple projects, and there could be some mulched areas in that one on Travertine, but put rock wherever the water rushes over. The one on Cass Hills and Blanco, I think just rock, some type of decorative river rock or. Right.
Monument.
It just gets so much heat, so much sun.
Yeah.
It just burns up plants, so it's.
It might be crushed granite or just even railroad ballast would be an improvement.
Right. So just some type of decorative rock. It wouldn't take much, maybe a yard or so. That's my idea.
Thank you, Bernard. George, your thoughts?
We definitely need to do something to beautify these areas in Castle Hills. Likewise, I do like the rock suggestion that Shannon brought up, but I also think we should probably put a plastic down to keep the weeds from coming up, so it'll hopefully reduce the maintenance if the rocks are on top of that, and just dig the holes for wherever the plants are. It'll at least minimize some of the maintenance, but I definitely like the idea.
Thank you, George. Jack?
The thought that occurred to me, I think Skip mentioned the idea of branding in his introductory comments. And to me, what we're talking about here is part of that bigger picture. And I don't know that we need to slow these ideas down. I think this is very nice and we ought to proceed. But I wonder if that suggests to us that we need a branding plan as well. Because I think there's other areas that really need a lot of help that you wouldn't even know you're moving into Castle Hills, for example, the corner of Blanco and Jackson Keller down on the south side. You would have no idea that you were entering this beautiful city. So if there was some way to landscape that, I don't know what, we'd have to study to see if there's any area even to work with, if we could have a row of trees or some shrubs or bushes or something to beautify that corner a little bit, because it's just all asphalt and concrete now. And I'm sure there's other areas, but the point I'm trying to make is that I think there's a larger picture, the branding altogether, which was suggested in that A&M plan some years ago, that perhaps we can pick that up.
Thank you, Jack. A couple comments I have. First of all, I like Skip's idea. I think we go after the low-hanging fruit. care of some of the ones that are just painfully obvious that we need some beautification. I would also like a couple of amendments on this, and my suggestion is for discussion would be that we do pursue some sort of a master plan, a master landscaping plan for the city as part of potentially the master plan of the city. I'd like to see we make that recommendation that that's included in the master plan, because we do need to, as Jack pointed out, and appropriately so, is we need to brand the city. You don't know when you're coming into Castle Hills, nor do you know when you leave Castle Hills. So I would like to see some sort of plan put together for doing the landscaping of our city. Thirdly, I would also recommend that we include a representative from the Garden Club to look at these areas that Skip had mentioned, because it would be a wonderful project that I think they'd be willing to participate in, and again, I think include them in this also, and kind of knock out some of this low-hanging fruit. My thoughts? Any thoughts on that?
Is that a motion?
That would be an amendment to the motion, that's correct. If we can make it part of the original motion, we'd keep it easy anyway.
Do we need a second to that amendment?
Okay, got a second, okay. Are we clear on what we're asking at this point from the committee? Ryan especially, are you clear what we're looking for?
Yes, sir. And I think that we just need to get an inventory of all these locations and then figure out the best option for them. Maybe identify a couple options for each one of these and see which is the best, and cost, those kind of things. But starting to inventory each location and what we think might be the ideal landscaping for each of those positions may be the best start first, and then work our way on prioritizing based on if it's in sort of a disarray, it needs to be cleaned up, or cost.
And I think that'd be considered part of the master landscaping plan for the city, if you agree with that.
No, I definitely think we can incorporate in the master plan. I'm just talking now, so from my standpoint, Mr. Harada, so everybody's on the same page, that we know which direction we're going right now, if we're gonna start tackling a few of these locations, and if something the city needs to get involved with, like Mr. Harada, and operationals or cost, we'll have to know those as well.
Okay. Skip, who's going to coordinate getting the clubs together and to do this review?
Why are you looking at me?
I was asking the question. Skip, who's going to?
Thanks for volunteering.
I can do it, I guess.
Okay.
I think it's worth mentioning. As George mentioned, that the fact is that I'm not an official member of the committee. The committee, however, does make its own rules, and so you can decide as chair either to accept or reject any motion that I might make if I were to make one. But I think it's worthwhile to remember that I'm not an official member of the committee. So you can decide to accept or reject any motion.
Right.
You can call for a motion if you want, and the council can make a decision as to whether they want to accept my motion, I think. Okay. But I think it's worthwhile to do it as simply as we can do it.
Agreed. No, I don't want to get into the weeds too much on things, so. Okay, so I think we have a motion by Jack, was it? Or correction, a motion by George and a second by Jack? Other way around, okay, motion by Jack, second by George.
But yours is more complicated, John. The idea of the master plan, the landscape master plan. I wonder if that's a separate motion.
I think as I recall, if I can restate, the motion was, Jack, that you wanted to invite the garden club, and that we should at some point consider putting in a master plan for branding. I point out that a good deal of that is already done in the 2006 A&M report. It lists 5 places where we should put gateway signs to the city, and it discusses in some depth the whole branding question. So I think that if we're going to do that, we can do a branding plan, and it would be separate, I think, from a planning or whatever other.
Well, one wonders if a landscape plan would be a subset of a branding plan.
or the other way around. Either way, yeah. I think it could be, but I think,
This is why I'm saying, I think we need a couple of different motions here. We got different things going on.
well, make the motion. Whatever motion you want to make,
Okay. I'm going to make three motions.
okay?
The first, well, wait a minute, John has already suggested the idea of a master landscape plan. So let's make that one motion,
Okay, let's make that a standalone motion.
standalone motion, and I will second that motion that we develop a master landscape plan.
Okay? All right, so we have a motion, and then we have a second. Do we have any specific discussion on that motion? All right, so all in favor of the motion as stated? Okay. Passes unanimously. Jack?
Okay. The second motion is that we develop a master branding plan as suggested in the A&M report. As Skip mentioned, there's a lot of ideas in there already. It may be just republishing some of that and perhaps reviewing it. It may not be very difficult. And I'm trying to think of, I don't know that there's a consultant that does such a thing. I suppose there is, but we probably could do that internally. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. So the motion is that we develop ourselves a branding plan and use as a foundation for that the information that was done in the 2006 A&M report.
Okay, Jack has a motion for the city to develop a branding plan and utilizing information from the 2006 Texas A&M report as a basis for that. Do I have a second on that motion? Okay, George seconds the motion. Beat you to it. Any discussion on that particular motion? Bernard?
Yes, I think Joe Isbrand would be great to contact for this motion, because he's big in marketing and wants our city to do well, so.
So and as part of the motion, we'll recommend, let me see here at this point, how do we do that? Recommend that the city manager reach out to Mr. Isbrand to help facilitate that process? Is that a reasonable request? All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any more discussion on that motion? Okay, all in favor? Okay, unanimous, thank you. Okay, Jack?
I'm not sure we need a motion for this third item, just the original idea where we suggested a professional, well, maybe we do. We have a professional planner, landscape planner, first of all, authorize Mr. Harada to go out with the garden club to look at those islands and things. And then have a professional planner come in and help develop what those plantings might be.
Jack, shouldn't that be part of the master landscaping plan, though?
One would think, John.
Okay. So I think what the emphasis here is on coordinating, and Skip has kindly volunteered to help in that process. Coordinating Rick, Mrs. Montemore, and the garden club to look at some of the low-hanging fruit that we have again, on some of the monument signs in some of the areas. And we just, I guess as a committee, do we want a motion or just encourage that to happen?
I think we just encourage it to happen.
Skip, are you okay with that?
I'm not quite sure what we just did. What are you recommending that we do? Is there an actual motion in there?
No,
We
there's not a
hire at
motion on
some
this
point
one.
a professional landscape planner to review?
That would fall under the previous motion.
Okay.
The thought is something like this, the three y'all could go ahead and move forward on a couple of these items.
Okay, as I understood what I'm to do, I'm to get contact with the garden club, Mr. Harada and Mrs. Montemayor, for all of us to go and look and see if there are appropriate plantings to put in at Travertine and
Cass
Cass
Hills.
Hills.
That's how I read it, and potentially this could be a project for the garden club if they chose to accept it.
Okay.
Okay, all right. All right, thank you.
I think Alan's her husband, and I don't remember what her name was. He mentioned her. He said she was a master gardener and that her big focus was on xeriscapes. Say again? Are they related to Mario?
go ahead and move forward?
Can I ask a question first?
Sure, go ahead.
On the
Skip.
motion to put together a master landscape plan, is that your motion and Jack's second?
Jack motioned, and I believe I seconded, is that correct? Okay. Or George seconded one of them. I think, George, you got the first one. That's
George
right.
got the second one. He
Yeah,
seconded the
second.
second.
Okay, there we go. Okay. Don't know. Okay, let's go back to the new business. Agenda item number 3, discussion and possible action on new reflective street signs for the city and a possible inclusion of the City of Castle Hills logo. This was an agenda item that was put forth by Mr. Gregory. Since he is not here, Skip, do you want to make a comment, or do we want to?
I'll address it briefly. Mr. Gregory's comment is that our current street signs are not sufficiently visible to be very useful to visitors passing through town or for folks trying to find a street to recognize and find the street. So he's recommending reflective street signs. He says that we could put in perhaps green and white or something of that sort, and it might be useful to put some Castle Hills identification so that people know they're in the city of Castle Hills, like some other areas in town have locally identified street signs, like the area down south of Hildebrand and east of Broadway, where they have that historic area. Let me suggest that we, for the time being, if you want, we can pass this, or you can do whatever you want to with it.
Yeah, I'd like to go ahead and we move this to the next meeting until Douglas is here, because there's a couple things that I think about off the top of my head. Are we talking about the Main Street signs on, say, Northwest Military? Or are we talking about those and all the residential street signs? I'd like to that thought to develop.
Okay, Mr. Gregory's comments on that would be that all of the street signs need to be replaced, and particularly the ones on the smaller streets, because you can't find them without decent street signage. And he said our street signage is not adequate right now.
And Mr. Montemayor's wife is Dr. Cheryl Hamilton.
Okay, tell me that again.
Dr. Cheryl Hamilton.
Cheryl, Cheryl, Sherol? Okay, Emerson?
Hamilton.
Hamilton,
Cheryl Hamilton.
okay.
All right, so on this agenda item, we're gonna move this to the next meeting, unless if there's any objection to that. Okay, all right, we'll move forward.
Can I
Yes.
bring up a point? I think Mr. Hurd is here in connection with Mr. Rapley's request related to the commons, is that right? And so he may want to put in his contribution so he can go do something else if he needs to.
Absolutely right. Thank you, Skip. Thank you, Skip. Let me go ahead then and,
So under number 3, old business.
okay. Let's go ahead and move forward. Agenda item number 3 under old business, discussion and possible action on follow-up proposals related to the commons and adjacent city property. So at the last meeting, we brought forward several ideas. I know, Ryan, you've developed those ideas as we requested. Can you go ahead and comment to where you're at to date?
Yes, sir. And as again, I have a map of obviously the dimensions of the commons and the vacant lot that we discussed last time. In between last meeting and now, have met with our on-demand engineers, and one of our on-demand engineers, LNV, has a subcontractor, which is Terra Design, that Mr. Hurd here works for and represents. We had a meeting not too long ago to talk about some of the ideas and concepts that this committee's come up with. And so he's here today to talk about and hear any feedback or any input this project committee might have to see what they'd like to see in the commons or in the vacant lot, and come back for the February meeting with a few concepts, possibly pricing, to see which direction this group wants to go and what ideas they want to incorporate into the commons, whether it might be landscaping, play set, the trails to connect, or anything that we want, maybe some options and renderings for the vacant lot. We talked about landscaping out front, in front of City Hall, to tie that in as well. So that's kind of what I'll be working with them as far as in front of City Hall, and that might include the Castle Hills Garden Club at some point as well. But generally, he's here to listen to the group, to talk about ideas of what we have for the commons, and then provide you some insight in his background on what projects he's done in other cities and how he might be able to help us on this project moving forward.
Okay. Ryan, thank you. Before we start injecting our ideas, I'd like to hear from Mr. Hurd as far as kind of maybe a quick background, and you've had a chance to obviously look at the site, I would assume. Very briefly. Okay, okay. And maybe some initial knee jerk, and then we'll get into it if that's okay. Oh, thank you, George.
I'd like to give you a background of the company, but I'm really here just to listen, to find out what everybody wants. And individually, you may want something different than this gentleman, and something different, and we need to kind of start developing that list so we can respond back to the city with things that they would like to see out there. And now, to give you a background, I've been around a long time. Been in the business since 1974. So, we do lots of municipal work. If you've been to, gosh, trying to think of facilities here. I know one big park that we just completed. If you've ever been to Fisher Park in Bernie, we did the golf course and the park at the same time over there. And it's become known as probably the best park in the San Antonio area. It's a beautiful, beautiful park. And it has a huge commons area in the center. It's a natural park, but in the center it has grass that we used on the golf course, tee boxes. So when you get there, you want to just take your shoes off and walk in the grass. It has every facility you could put in a park, a spray ground, huge playground, 2 playgrounds. There's 8 small rentable pavilions, and there's 2 large pavilions, 30 by 60, and they both have outdoor kitchens. So it's 2 sets of restrooms, and this all happens on about 3 acres. And it's the core of the park, and it's really nice. The big pavilions are separated with a mall down the center, so you could be having a wedding here and the wildest family reunion at this end, and you wouldn't disturb each other. So, also includes a nature center, ponds, restored Blacklands Prairie, and about 2.5 miles of trails. So it's quite a park. But we do, I guess we've probably done 50 park facilities for the city of San Antonio since I've lived in San Antonio. Worked most recently on the West Side Creeks project, which was about $24 million worth of development, Elmendorf Park, and about 7 miles of trail for the River Authority. Lots of neighborhood parks, but we specialize in working, I'm talking about bigger communities. The city of Bernie, I don't know how familiar you are with the city of Bernie, but we've done almost all their work downtown, everything from wayfinding to they call it the Bernie Mile, and it's the old historic mile of Main Street that goes through town. We did all the visioning on that. And we do lots of graphic design. You were talking about branding. The city had us develop their trails signage master plan. Unfortunately, it was after they had probably built about 40 miles of trails for the Howard Peak Greenway trails. And then we came back and we did a master plan that tried to show how all the signs could be modified to look alike. And then we developed a mapping system that they're going to use regionally. We're using it in New Braunfels now and in Bernie now. So all these trails eventually are going to connect. And we developed a map that is, and I think you mentioned that when we met, that you can look at it and it's extremely easy to read. We also do branding. We do lots of graphic design and illustration and that kind of thing. possibilities for your park, these village greens, and that's what I'm calling, that's like a village green, like the old village green where you were right outside of City Hall and the fire department was across the street and the train station was over here. You've got kind of that setup right now, and I think it's just about the right size to really work well. I understand you already have festivals there, you do something at Fiesta,
Concerts.
yeah, and that's the kind of, we design for that kind of activity, and how you can set up for festivals with power grids underground, and there's just lots of things you can do. Also, the connection to the school. We developed the concept of the city of McAllen down in the valley, city school concept, and where all of their parks are being built adjacent to schools so they can share facilities and interact with each other. They each pay for things, and it works out really well. But these shared facilities and having access to the park from the schools, I think, is really important. And when I first moved here, we lived right in this area when we moved here, and that was back in '84. And my daughter used to practice at the little field over here. It's now a parking lot. There was a soccer field over there. So I spent many an afternoon there. So.
Walter, well, thank you for that introduction. So let's go ahead and jump into this. I got to move forward on the agenda.
Okay.
I made some promises I'm trying to keep. So
Real quick, and part of our discussion, I had told them, that eventually we get to a point, like I mentioned, having renderings and illustrations and possible pricing, but what I've given him is what this project committee has talked about already, which is some additional landscaping in the commons, lighting, a play set, a trail to connect, and then a couple options of what the vacant lot might look like from a use standpoint. So he has some ideas that I've already provided for him, and again, that's why he's here, to see what else you may like to see as a project committee moving forward.
okay. George, go ahead.
The one last comment I'd like to make before Mr. Hurd comes up with some wonderful plan. One, we don't have a $24 million budget, so I was wondering if we could kind of give him a range that we have to spend on this project before he designs what we can afford.
Thank you, George. Appreciate that.
Yeah, again, they're working under our current engineer, and we do have an engineering budget, but we did talk about, again, a minimal design on what could look like. And again, these are renderings and ideas with price tags to it. And ultimately, if the price tags don't fit our budget, we can't do them.
Okay. So
But to answer your question, Mr. Booth, we're not looking to spend a lot of money on a design.
Okay, so let's go ahead and, as Walter said, he's here to listen to our ideas of what we would want to see in a enhanced commons area for the community. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Okay. I guess I'll kind of start if that's okay. And I was going to make Bernard start, but I'll take it. Okay. Okay, so I think the shortcomings that we have seen is we don't have an area for children, for small children to play. And that was one of the original items that came up, is to bring forward a play area or potentially play areas in the two areas that we have for use for the community. Second thing I thought about is, and it came up from one of the residents, is we have an open area on the side street. What is that? What's that street again? Persimmon. They were wanting to bring some sort of sports court in there, maybe along with a child play area that we could have as part of it, where it'd be more of a community, but also could be used when we utilize the commons area, the commons. And then we talked about, one of the first things we talked about is how do we connect these areas? And I walked it. I don't see an issue with trying to connect them with a relatively wide, well-lit path where we could go ahead and tie them together to utilize them for whatever activities that we come up with. We also talked about some sort of more of a permanent type place to where people can either have a bandstand or something off to one side of the park. And then we talked about bringing in some water for people and for little critters. I think that was a project that was either moving forward or we needed to move forward on that. And then we also talked about trying to bring some sort of electrification that we can tie into versus running extension cords everywhere, which we've been doing in the past. Okay, Ryan, you want to say something on that?
Yeah, real quick on two things. We already have the water fountain we want for the park. And part of this is, again, creating this plan. Where is the best opportunity for this water fountain to go? Is it near the play set, where we want to put this? But we already have the water fountain we want for the commons, price, everything. And then we already have that electrical, as I mentioned to Mr. Hurd, we already have the electrical design done from that standpoint. So we're good on both of those. It's just a matter where we incorporate it into this plan.
Thank you, Ryan. I also want to bring one thing else up that should be, in my opinion, motivating us to help move forward on this type of project. I'm going to do this to him. He may hate me for it, but I'm going to ask Mayor Trevino to share. He's very motivated to want to help move this process forward. Do you mind sharing your thoughts on that, JR?
Sure. Thank y'all for having me here, and thank y'all for doing what you do. I appreciate it. So in my conversations with Mr. Squire and some of the other people in the city, just like Mr. Booth, I understand that there's streets that need to get done, and we have flooding improvement that needs to take precedence as well, because there's some life safety matters there. And what I had told Mr. Squire is I would be happy to fundraise the initial amount to get us a playground set. I imagine that's anywhere from maybe 30 to 40,000. But I think that small investment in the center of our city for our community would be a great springboard for future projects, and showing people that we can work together and we can do things a different way than just taking tax dollars. What I would ask is for a rendering, because I would think that would make it a lot easier to raise those funds when people know what they're raising funds for, and not just saying, give me some money and I'll make you happy. But that's my offer. So anything y'all can do to help me help the city, I appreciate it.
Chair, thank you for sharing that. And to me, that kind of motivates, let's not let this thing drag out, and let's move forward on whatever we feel is appropriate for our city in this regard. So, okay, so I said my piece. I'd like to start. Bernard, go ahead. I'll get you two.
I think, yes, having a plan, like one that's written out. There's several plans, that like JR can say, look, this is what we want to do in the future, but we want to start here. So it gives people like a vision, and I think it's a great way to move forward. So let's do it.
Bernard, thank you. George?
I don't have anything.
Okay, great. Jack?
Just a couple of things. To me, the link is critical, the connector between the existing commons and that other area up on Persimmons. And I would suggest that maybe our designers think about the idea of some activity actually happening within that link, where it's not just a pathway, there's activities happening there of some kind. Second thing is, I think it would be nice if we had some sort of a shaded rest area with benches and chairs and things where folks could get out of the hot sun in the summertime. Maybe it's located in such a way that the breeze comes through whenever that happens. And so it's for adults as well. Certainly it's for kids, but it's for adults as well. And maybe they just want to chill and keep an eye on the kids rather than playing ball or whatever. Finally, I think that we're going to have to plan in some way to have public input, whether it's right now as at the inception, or if we want to get to a couple of renderings, maybe 2D renderings before we start spending real money. And let the folks have a look at it and see what they think. And they may have other things that we haven't even thought of. And so I think that's it.
Thank you, Jack, and I'm going to make a comment on that because I can. I think once people hear about what we're trying to do, this is going to be a hot button. And so you're exactly right. We need to involve the community in this, and we need to advertise it when it's appropriate also too. So, and I think your idea of having some renderings would be a very good thing to do before we bring everybody in. But again, I think we need to advertise this and get the community involved. We've got a lot of young families that are just, they're there, and I talked to some of our new elected officials about this, and they're, that's one of the biggest things that these people are wanting is an area to take their families and their kids, and I can't blame them. So, okay, Skip.
Is it okay for me to just kind of review the history of things that we've looked at on this project? Mr. Hurd, let me call your attention to this display up here on the LED board behind the tables. What we have are these 3 or 4 lots running along the front of Lemonwood and down Persimmon. Persimmon's a street running from roughly the water tower, the little round thing there on the display, up to the northwest. And Lemonwood is a street running directly in front of that large green building on the south side of that construction, which is the fire department. The Commons is most of the 2 lots on the southwest side of that large rectangle. And what our vision was to try to keep the large empty space available, because we use it for all kinds of things. Occasionally we put up a bandstand, we have music, there's dancing. Occasionally we have a movie. We have Fiesta where we have tents and vendors set up there as well. And so we don't want to destroy the use of that open space for multiple purposes in the community. If you look at the northwest side of that large rectangle, you'll see that there is a tree line running from southwest to northeast behind the Commons area. And that the tree line extends substantially into the Commons. On the yellow line where the Commons property ends, there is a fence line. And just southeast of that fence line, there appears to be a small drainage swale. And then next to the swale, there's a berm more proximate to the center of the Commons. So we've been looking at those plantings there. Most of it is trash, local or invasive species, which could be taken out. And we're looking at connecting that lot on Persimmon behind the Public Works area, which is the small building directly behind the fire department. You see the one with the green roof there? And behind that, there's an empty lot. And that empty lot has some trash plants in it now along the fence line on the southwest side of that lot, and on the continuation of the fence line from the Commons proper over to that lot. So we're looking at ripping out some of the trash stuff, putting in more appropriate plantings, and opening a walkway between the Commons proper and the Persimmon lot. The Persimmon lot has potential for lots of things. It's been suggested that we put in a basketball court. It's been suggested that if we put in an asphalt surface basketball court, we might also be able to use it for parking if that became necessary, say during Fiesta or at some other time. We could put in around the perimeter perhaps a small play area for children where their parents could be playing basketball, for example, and the children might be playing in that area. One of the problems that we have with that area being separated from the main part of the Commons is security, so we need to have some security camera visibility over that lot. Another area where we've considered putting in a play area is at the southwest corner of the fire department. There where you see 3 trees along Lemonwood, the centermost tree is beside a walkway that comes from the school. And so between that walkway and the fire department might be an area for a small play area, or perhaps more focused on younger children. We'd have to put in some fencing around that to keep them from running into the street by some accident or another, but that's an area that would be proximate to or close to the Commons proper, where parents might be doing some other activity where they might still be able to see their children. And that's an important consideration for us. So those are all things that we've looked at. We've looked at putting in a gazebo on the Commons that might be used for all sorts of things. On the northeast side of the open Commons area, you see that there is some space between a couple of small trees right adjacent to the fire department parking lot. And so there's a place there where we might consider putting in a gazebo if that were an appropriate thing, or if the committee and the public decide that's something that they want. Whether it's useful or not is another question. It has to be large enough and covered enough to be useful perhaps in inclement weather for music or display or ceremonials or whatever. The other thing we've looked at is putting in a bandstand. We've talked about a permanent bandstand. I think the consensus of the committee seems to be that a permanent bandstand is not really appropriate because it locks in too much of the commons from being used for other things. What we have now is essentially a portable bandstand, the disadvantage of which is that it has no roof, and that there, in the past, has been insufficient lighting there for people who are in the commons in the evening to listen to music to be able to see the band as well. So the lighting program, I think that Mr. Rapley has looked at may solve that problem. I think that a portable bandstand that might be set up on the northwest side of the commons is probably what we'll wind up with. Whether we put some kind of a roofing on, capability on it, tent, awning, whatever, that's a whole nother consideration down the way. So those are the things that we've looked at. We also want to put in a fountain in the commons for use by people as well as animals. One that would have a regular drinking fountain plus a facility at the bottom for feeding, for watering pets and so forth. And we have the fountain, but we don't have a location for it yet. So those are all things that we're looking at doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Skip. Brian, you
That
have a
is the
comment?
fountain. That's the one we have already identified to purchase. Another thing I mentioned to Mr. Hurd quickly is you mentioned having our Castle Hills Fiesta event. In doing that electrical study, the idea was to provide, as Skip mentioned, not only the lights, but a better place for like vendors to plug in. And so as that event grows, I told Mr. Hurd somewhere down the line, we probably want to be able to put a diagram in for where vendors go for like Castle Hills Fiesta events, so they know exactly where to set up on the day of the event, and it kind of helps plan out better that day. And I think that event is going to grow as we move forward, so it's better to have a diagram for these vendors where to plug and play at that point as well.
Brian, thank you.
I had one more thing.
Go ahead.
I was just thinking, you know, the bandstand and like a cover, and then Jack was mentioning a shaded spot to sit. I don't know if those two can be incorporated.
It could be.
Yeah.
It depends on, we're going to look at that. And that
It's just
occurred
a
to
thought,
me
yeah.
when we were doing this, when I was writing the notes down here. Well, I have a couple of questions. You
Before
mentioned some things.
before you, and
Oh, I'm sorry.
I want to bring you forward
Sorry.
on this, so, because now we've thrown all the stuff at you. But one quick comment in regards to the upcoming Fiesta Castle Hills event, which will be here sooner rather than later. And Ryan, this is directed at you, by the way. This is specifically directed at you. Is we talk about trying to utilize, and we know this event is going to grow, at least what I've heard, it's going to be a pretty packed event. That vacant lot, it would be nice if we could at least make it accessible for this upcoming event. I mean, at the very least, I've talked about clearing some of the scrub trees to where we can have that as an option to use. And that's their committee that's going to bring that forward, or may bring that forward. But if they run out of space, it may be a way to tie that in, at least temporarily, for that event. Ryan, is that a fair request to consider it?
Possibly, it depends. I mean, a number of factors from safety, liability.
Yes, agreed.
I know it kind of grows into the parking lot next to Public Works. I have some issues with, you know, fire coming in and out of there and responding and coming back and having people walk back through there. So I think about liability and safety factors.
And please do, it's appropriate to do.
If it was open and accessible right now and had some better lighting, then it may not be an issue from that standpoint. But as this possibly grows into planning this out, then future years, if it does address the liability and safety factors, at least from my standpoint and the city standpoint.
Okay, all right, thank you. Walter, I'd love to hear your thoughts in regards to all our
Well,
rambling.
I just have more questions.
Okay.
You had mentioned the things that currently happen in the open space and the commons. What other things, kind of dream a little bit, what other things would you like to see happen?
Besides, we do movie nights.
Okay, movie night, I got it.
We do that, and with concerts in the Commons. Any suggestions on events we could do?
Well, you said you do booths at Fiesta, you have your own Fiesta there. Anything at Christmas?
Yeah,
Tree lighting deal?
we do. Yeah, and there's a tree, that fairly sizable tree that's in the middle of the Commons that gets lit, and
I
it's,
saw it, yeah.
yeah, and it's a,
There's a snow slide deal.
bringing
Yeah.
artificial snow, and
I didn't see that.
Well, it
it melted.
didn't last very long.
Does Santa ever come and visit there and see kids?
Absolutely.
How do you do that?
Huh?
How does that
He
work?
magically comes.
Pulls up in the fire truck.
He comes on fire truck, but this year he stayed in just a tent, like a gazebo little, pop-up Christmas. And, they just put a couple chairs, little backdrop.
No, that's great. You probably have people waiting in line to get in.
Yes, yes, we did, and it was wonderful. It was one of the most well-attended tree lighting events that I've ever seen since I've been here. I will say that. The ballerinas there too, had a dancing troupe.
But in combination of events, again, we'd start talking about having a portable stage, because it'd have been nice for a portable stage. And then again, improving the ability for audio, not audio, but, excuse me, audio, yes.
Yeah.
So there was an issue with audio, so part of that is just the electrical support there and getting some kind of PA system, not actually for the Commons, but at least dedicated for events that the cities can use at some point.
Probably, we also have the mayor's picnic, I think, in the Commons. Summer, yeah.
Now, what's the mayor's picnic?
It's another event, I guess, they would have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good community get-together and
Okay.
and a little festive atmosphere.
Big buffet, or how does that work out there? You bring your
No,
own-
I think they had snow cones last time. What was it?
And then
They had
Oh,
food,
blow
no,
up,
food
the
trucks.
balloon, not balloon, but
the bouncy house, and then slides for like water, a lot of water stuff. So.
Slip and slide.
Slip
Yeah,
and
they
slide
put
stuff.
just soap on the tarp, and they just.
And then we bring food trucks in too also for various events.
Would we ever consider taking a portion of the Commons or its expanded area that we've discussed and maybe leasing it out for family events? If there were a gazebo and a barbecue or something, would we ever consider that leasing to others? Castle Hills residents, but outside.
If you have a nice facility, people will want to rent it.
Right.
I think I'd
rather reserve it instead of charging our own residents fees for it.
But however you want to do it.
Unless there's a cleanup fee, maybe opposed to a deposit if they don't clean up, obviously.
Walter, those are some good questions. Anything else?
Well, I don't want to take too much of your time. But yeah, no, this has been really helpful. This area has a really official commons, village green. This has so many possibilities.
Okay.
And they don't have to be enormously expensive. I think the way we're going to approach this is to come up with a list of everything you want and see how we can reflect things in a master plan that makes sense where they're located so that one item can go in at a time. But you still have a place for the rest of things to fit and fit in a proper manner so that they work. And I did not realize until just now, I knew you had the Fiesta deal, but how many other activities you really have out there. So we can do things to accommodate those in our design and make it more useful for that. One thing that we talked about when we first met a few days ago was the booth arrangement. It's not very regular. You might be over here, you might be over there, and well, we set these up in parks all the time, and because we're in San Antonio and in this area, you have lots of fiesta celebrations with booths. But we always provide a power grid underground where 4 or 5 booths can plug into an underground plug. When they're done, get lid screws down, flush with the ground, you're done. And it's very simple. They have to bring their own cords. You don't have to do anything. And you do it one time and they're done. And we always have them front on a trail or a walk so that the people going by, until they go in the booth, stay on the sidewalk. Kind of saves wear and tear.
Halloween too, they did a
That
trunk or
was,
treat,
I
but
started to write Halloween down.
we did it in the parking lot this year, but it would be nice to have it in the commons where it's not, there's grass and the trunk or treat. But it would be nice to have it in the commons where the residents can set up a little area where they can hand out
That comes
candy.
with better lighting though.
Right. That's just another event that,
We've developed little Santa lands for communities and all kinds of things like that. This could be just a seasonal place where everybody gets together, and it sounds like it's already that way in a way, but maybe we could make it a little more user-friendly.
Walter, I would like to kind of set the expectation at this point, if that's okay, and then we got to move on with our agenda. Reasonably, because we talked about having this come back at the February committee meeting, reasonably, what could we expect?
We will probably come up with 3 alternative plans for you to look at. Two at the least, but probably 3.
Okay.
And to give you just 3 different looks. And what we like to do is let you pick the things you like out of each one, and that will end up in maybe a final master plan. You know, and we may throw a few wrenches in each one. So we don't want you to pick one. We want you to pick the things you like out of each one.
Okay.
Generally, we have the public involved in this, but I don't think that's going to happen in this process. Would I be right until the very end?
Well, I think it may be, we'll need to advertise this for the February meeting, and hopefully we get public participation, as long as you let people know we're talking about the redo or the upgrade of the commons. And
Because we can do a process with that where they can select things that they like and don't like.
by no means will this be a final idea. This will be just one more step in the right direction. Then it'll go to council after that. And at that point, that's when it gets serious. So, but, okay. Well, I think we've had all the questions, and Walter, appreciate you sharing today.
Okay, well, thanks for
Thank you for
inviting
taking
me.
the time to attend. All right.
I brought my own, yeah. Didn't know you had any.
nice one there.
Let's go ahead and move on to agenda item number 4. This is discussion and possible action on the reorganization of the project and parks committees. I went ahead and brought this forward in that I think Skip made mention of it at our previous meeting, of some of the duplicity that we have among the 2 committees, and I think the thought process is it would be more efficient if we work with council to look at dissolving one committee and putting it within and rebranding or renaming potentially the Parks Committee, so we could do all of this together, because there is some overlap here in what we do. So it's an item that I think we should look at pursuing. But I'd like to open this up to discussion among this committee and then potentially at our next meeting too. So thoughts, Skip, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, we talked about it a couple of times and about whether we can combine the 2 committees. The advantages are that presently we have 2 agendas, 2 sets of minutes, 2 sets of officers is not really a problem. But it seems to me that there is a good deal of overlap in the beautification areas, in particular between parks and projects. The one issue is that parks comes under the heading of Parks and Recreation, which is Section 30 of the code. We have a Parks Commission, and when we originally wrote the Parks Commission, the Project Committee, all the members of the Project Committee volunteered to be the Parks Commission. So there's never been a Parks Commission appointed as such. It's always been the Project Committee. And the reason that came about that way was because the whole idea for the parks came up out of the project committee. Tanya Garza, who was our first young lady who was on the project committee, brought it up at the very first meeting, and Mr. Judemeyer took off with it and developed the school parks project. And now we have at least one full park with Castle Hills Elementary and a second park underway, under development at Jackson Keller Elementary Schools. And so that's how the connection came up in the first place. We could combine the two into one committee, assign the project function to the Parks Commission, or name the parks, maybe Parks and Project Committee or something of that sort, and have them all appointed at once, and we continue to do things the way we have been doing them as it is. The other purpose of that would be to make the project committee essentially a formal committee and a permanent committee, which it is not now. This is, the project committee is an ad hoc committee which exists from year to year, although presently we don't have a termination date, but we have modified our mandate for the project committee to encompass a huge scope. And right now, there is not that much work in parks, but there's a great deal of work going on in projects. What we did was we expanded the scope of the project committee to include essentially almost anything that contributes to the success of any plan or program of the city and enhances the quality of life of our city. Economic development, a master plan, all of that stuff is open for us to come up with an idea that does some good for the citizens. And so we could tack those together as a Parks and Project Committee and attack the projects stuff as an additional assignment to the Parks Commission and call it Parks and Projects and stick it under Recreation because recreation is recreating the good life in the city of Castle Hills.
Skip, thank you. Okay, so on the agenda, Jack, any comments?
Just that I think it makes a lot of sense to combine the two for the reasons that you guys have been talking about.
Okay.
And so I'd be in favor of such a move should the council decide it's a good thing.
Okay. George, your thoughts on combining the committees?
No, I think it's a good idea to combine them. I think it's ultimately up to the attorney's advice and the council to make it happen. Make sure there's nothing against, or they can modify the rules to do that. I think it's excellent, and it would save a lot of trouble between the two committees, just combine them, and it's the same people.
Okay.
Anyway.
Right, agreed. Thank you, George. Bernard, your thoughts on combining them?
All in favor. It's just, makes sense. So it's, as long as we can, like Skip said, keep it going. So keep this committee going. I think we're doing great work, and I want to see it, even if we're not on the committee, I want to see this committee moving forward, helping out our community.
Right, agreed, thank you. Okay, so I think we're all in agreement here as far as this, it would make sense, and I think it's very logical to do that. I guess the question is how? George brings up an excellent point that we got to make sure what we do is legal, falls within our ordinances. There may be some state ordinances because it's considered a Parks Committee. I don't know, or Parks Commission. I don't know if there's anything that involves there. But I'd like to motion that we have an agenda item that either Mr. Gregory or somebody brings forward an agenda item to combine the ad hoc project committee and the Parks Committee into one appropriately tasked and named committee to take on these projects and park issues that we're addressing today. Ryan, go ahead.
Real quick, one of the things I did yesterday, and I had told Mr. McCormick and Mr. Isbrand, and I think got some direction from the mayor about, is our boards and commissions. And so yesterday I put up there the application form, just like any other city. And as I'm going through it, and we're in the process of now starting really to get into our our website redesign that we're hoping to launch in a few months is a dedicated board and commissions page. Well, you have each one listed, you talk about the frequencies, description, you really got a purpose. And I think by defining a purpose and real mission of what this ad hoc / Parks Commission does is helps move this forward for not only this year or last year, but continual, like I think Bernard said, making sure that who's ever on the committee, this is a staple for the city of Castle Hills moving forward.
Right,
But defining exactly what that purpose is, because you can look at each one of the boards and commissions we have, and it says, here's exactly what it does, and here's exactly what its purpose. I think that that's what, we have ideas about what we do here, or y'all do as this project committee with quality of life improvement, economic development, and infrastructure projects, but really defining what it does and helping it have that purpose moving forward so it becomes a stable and/or staple for a board or a commission moving forward. This is just my input. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll comment on, now that, what you're saying is actually in the legislation, the ordinance that made us what we are today. And so I guess your comment is you want to make sure that that type of language stays in with whatever committee this becomes, is that your thought? Okay. And that needs to be part of the ordinance as whatever is written and presented to council is what you're,
And because, you know, when people ask, I've described this as, again, trying to come up with ideas in the arena of quality of life improvements, economic development, and infrastructure projects, because this started out as an MPO looking at infrastructure improvements in the community.
right.
And of course, it's since expanded, and then we have the park side, which is the quality of life. So basically, you're incorporating that and combining it into essentially one commission.
Right, right. Okay, well, so I'm proposing a motion, or I'm proposing a motion, and the action would be to go ahead and develop an ordinance to combine these committees. I think the committee should be probably titled in respect to the projects and potentially projects and parks committee. So we know we're doing projects, but we're also incorporating parks into us, or project and parks commission, if that's reasonable. I want to keep the projects out there because that's kind of the meat of what we're working on, if that's reasonable. Even the parks is kind of a project-oriented parks thing too. We take on these little projects. Is my thought. And Bernard, I'm trying to, if I'm stepping on your toes, I apologize.
No. I think, but Skip was trying to, I think, say the parks should be first, because then that's we already have a chapter or something in the ordinances. Is that what I'm?
Either way, either way.
The reason I raised that is because Chapter 30 of the code is entitled Parks and Recreation.
Okay.
And so we could create a Parks Commission, which we've already done. It's in ordinance. There's no ordinance concerning the Project Committee. The Project Committee was created by a resolution.
Right.
And so what we would be doing is making the Project Committee a permanent part of the Parks Commission, or the other way around. Take your choice. It really doesn't matter. There'd be the same people doing it either way, but we could probably call it Parks and Projects. We already have an ordinance. We could add to that projects, an additional assignment list, the stuff that we already have in the resolution, and make it, instead of a resolution, an ordinance, and codify it just like we would every other permanent committee.
That we do. Okay, sounds good. Sounds good.
If I may just, I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
Okay, so with that wonderful input, appreciate that. I think that'll be the intent, is to go ahead and have the Parks and Projects Commission. I think that's what we would work to become. I would ask, if that's okay, Skip, I'd ask your help on making the modification to that ordinance.
Yes, yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I would like to be authorized to contact the city attorney with regard to this. I've looked at it myself, and my impression is that there's nothing that prohibits us from doing this. I don't see a direct conflict, but I think it's something that I should check with Mr. Schnall about. His expertise in municipal laws is over my head.
Okay. All right, so, and then one addition would be to authorize Mr. McCormick, with the assistance of Mr. Rapoli, to reach out to our staff attorney. So that's kind of the motion in a nutshell. Not a very good nutshell, but do I have a second on that? Okay, I have a second from Bernard. Jack, you had comments.
I just want to make sure we incorporate Ryan's point where we define what it is we're going to be doing, our mission or vision, whatever we want to call it. I'm not sure that's part of the ordinance now, but I would suggest that we get that done prior to going to council and say, this is what we suggest.
Nice thing, it will not happen at this meeting, it'll happen after the February council meeting. So, should be good. Okay, George, your thoughts?
The only thing that, and I don't care what we call it, I seem to recall at one of the council meetings, there was discussion, as long as we don't designate the area as a park, it stays only for the use of Castle Hills residents. So I know that that's come up in the past, but that's my only comment, and I'm sure the attorney is aware of the situation, and so it's a matter of semantics at this point. But yes, I think this is worthwhile to combine these two, and I'd make that recommendation for Mr. Rapley and/or Mr. McCormick to go ahead and pursue that with the powers that be.
Okay, great, thank you, George. Bernard? Anything else? Okay, all right, so we got a motion, and we have a second by Bernard. All in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Skip, you ready to take that task on? Okay, good, thank you. All right, agenda item number 5, discuss new ideas, accept input from the public. Does anyone on this committee have any additional ideas that we're kind of not, that we haven't broached as of yet today?
Can I ask a dumb question, please, John? Does this same agenda item appear on the Parks Commission agenda? And I apologize.
It does, yes.
Okay, okay.
Well, we were sitting here discussing some different ideas of what we hope for the commons and the adjoining area. You know, Mr. Rapley brought up a good point about safety. As much as I hate fences, I think, you know, we need to consider that over there by the fire department and public works, because we don't want little kids running around, possibly getting into the way of emergency vehicles. And of course, we can't have any parking over there because of the emergency vehicles, so that's definitely off limits. I suspect we probably need a sign that says there's no parking for, no public parking over there. Likewise, I thought maybe a putting green. It doesn't take much space, one hole, it's green. Well, not necessarily, but I'm not opposed to that. And if we do add any parking, which I of course hate to take away from the what little land we do have, that it's porous, or whatever the other word is for, that it's not just a blacktop space that you can, impervious cover. Yes, that's it. That it's impervious, so cars could park there. I don't really like parking on a basketball court. You know, I want it designated because I'd hate to see one person, gee, we parked here, now a couple guys want to come over, and, or women, or children, to come play, and gee, there's a car there. It's like, well, kind of defeats the purpose. So anyway, just some thoughts.
The idea of a putting green, that's interesting. Yeah, I was gonna say, Ryan, take a note and make sure, mention that to Walter too when you talk to him. Please do. And the fence, quick question for you, Georgia, just to clarify. The fence you're referring to would be between, say, the parking lot of behind the fire department and the commons? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, I think it needs
Limit people walking across?
I think it needs to go from basically, let me get my orientation here, from where the fire department is to the corner, the back corner of the property, going towards Caladium, and then across behind Public Works, and it doesn't have to be continuous because you have a building, so that's your artificial fence. Just so if anybody's in that upper corner of Persimmon area and they're walking across, they're not going to be, you know, cutting through the property, you know, where the fire department and Public Works is. I mean, I really think it needs to be.
You could almost extend the existing fence that's back there right now, because there's a wooden fence back there, I think, and especially behind on the north side, there's a fence that goes back on that side. And that would address that, and that part of it. But I like the idea of maybe isolating the parking lot, and people don't run up behind the fire department.
Yeah, just this week, because I mean, I walked through the parking lot from my house to pick up my daughter from school. And just this last week, I walked behind the maintenance building instead of through the parking lot. And it was awesome, it was great. So
It's a natural path.
right.
Clean it up,
And
widen it
it
up.
keeps me out of the,
Level it out. Natural,
Right.
I think it'd be good. Okay, George, thank you. Okay, we have the public here. Shannon, would you like to incorporate any ideas or any thoughts that come up in all this listening you've done with us?
Well, do you need me up here again?
Sorry.
I'm thinking Tuesday, we have a meeting of the garden club. So I'm going to go back to the garden club and discuss your ideas about the monuments and the street signs and see if they even want to do that as our project. I think that's our next step, since we've already talked about the tree and that's, we've got other options now. That's been a while. And so I think it's a great idea that you have a garden club representative. I assume that's going to be me because I'm the project chairman, that are going to go around to these sites and figure out exactly what we can do. The one thing somebody suggested putting down, if we do decide to use rocks, that black plastic, it doesn't work. We've got rocks behind our house in an area where grass wouldn't grow. We're thinking about doing it in front of our house in a very shaded area. We've replanted, we've re-sodded that I don't know how many times. It will not grow in the shade, no matter what kind of grass you put in there. So we have some little areas that we're going to put rocks in, and it's going to look fine because there's a lot of other landscaping around it. So we've never had that much trouble with anything except oak runners, and they're going to come up anywhere. So we've never used that black plastic. It doesn't last, right?
it always starts showing through.
That's right.
It works for about 6 months.
That's right.
And then stuff grows on top of it, so
It's a mess. We have to be careful as far as if we do decide to do this and to take part in this and to use rocks, get rocks that you can blow easily because.
Oh, big enough rocks that will handle that.
Yeah.
Okay,
That,
makes sense.
that aren't going to just be like mulch.
Okay.
So those are my only ideas. I'm going to go back and report on this on Tuesday to the garden club.
just a suggestion, because I see a lot of people picking up pecans, they like when and so a pecan tree.
That's a thought. That's a thought.
I mean, during, when it's harvest time, you see people out there just,
Yeah, I like fig trees.
Well,
I'm just kidding. I'm just
do
kidding.
pecan trees need spraying and?
No, I mean, there's one out here, right?
There's one there
Yeah,
now, and it
Right by the
doesn't get the
crosswalk.
bagworms and all of that mess that,
I'm sure it does, but it's just a common.
right. Well, that's a thought.
Well,
I'll suggest that to them too.
Okay, Shannon, thank you.
Well,
Super
thank you for
appreciate it.
inviting me, and when you decide that you want to go visit the monuments, give me a ring. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
I thank you very much for inviting me.
While you're here, let me-
Shannon, before you go, would you mind telling me when your next meeting is and where?
It is on Tuesday.
That's this coming Tuesday, if I recall right.
Yes, it is. It's,
That'd be the 14th,
February 14th,
or January 14th?
I mean, January 14th at, I've got that it's on Jackson Keller, the Ventura Hills at 1207 Jackson Keller. And it's, Sharon told me that we had a speaker cancel on us, and so the speaker's coming back to speak there. Ventura Hills, is that what used to be Brookdale down there on Jackson Keller?
Oh, that sounds right.
Oh, I've been to their meeting room,
Yeah,
if that's what it is. They're
yeah.
great.
It's Ventura Hills.
Okay.
The reason why I'm hesitating, I kind of had it in my head that it was going to be at the home of Sherry Johnson on Blewett, but that's February. So
At what time?
it's at Ventura Hills, and it's at 10 o'clock.
AM. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not a morning person, but I make it here anyway.
Could you do that, or?
I'd like to attend if, like,
Well, we'd love to have you attend.
just so I can see what's going on and meet y'all, because I've been wondering about your committee, and I thought they might use our community room, because that's what it is for.
Well, I think we have planned to use the community room in March, so,
But theirs is nicer.
yeah.
Okay.
So,
Well, thank you so much again. I
well,
appreciate it.
thank you, and hopefully I'll see you at
Yes, thank
our
you.
meeting.
Yes, yes. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's move on. Let's get on our old business. Let's see here, Jack. Discussion of possible action on use of vegetated drainage channel to help with drainage problems. Possible meeting with Sarah.
The Sarah thing was something Mr. Monteyor had suggested, but I think we need to get a little bit further along in our idea before we do that. But in the meantime, I've got a contact at the City of San Antonio, the fellow who's in charge of all of their greenways. They themselves have been doing this for a long time, and they have like 39 miles of similar kind of stuff. So I'm going to talk to this gentleman, his name is Mr. Rivera. Hopefully we'll get together this coming week. But, it's still researching, trying to figure it out.
Okay, great. So no action at this point then, Jack?
No
correct?
action.
Okay. Old business item number 2, discuss for action on master plan discussion in September, October meetings. That's Douglas. I don't think there's an update at this point. Am I correct, Skip, or is there something to say?
I can give you an update. Gregory is still working on, he and Mr. Rapley have had regular meetings working on the master plan. Mr. Gregory tells me that he expects it to be done sometime in February, and he will then run it by the members of the master planning committee before he does anything else with it. He may bring it to us, I don't know.
Thank you, Skip. Old business agenda item number 5, discussion of possible action on flood control funds and possible matching flood money. Ms. Hoppe, you brought that forward. I want to say that Skip, I don't know if you all got the email from Skip that gave us some of the information. Is there anything that we can discuss on that today besides the fact we're probably behind the curve again, unfortunately? Skip, go ahead.
Yeah, we are behind the curve, and the thing that we can still do, and we can do it now if you wanted to, is to authorize Mr. Rapley to initiate and pursue discussions with City of San Antonio in connection with the flood control money. The plan that I sent around to everybody last week is the draft plan proposal from the Texas Water Development Board, I guess it is. And the problems with it are that there are about, as I remember, $463 million that the state has taken from the rainy day fund to put into flood control. And this is state money, not FEMA money. So they have written a plan out which is designed to put that money in the cities who are least capable of paying for their own flood control. And so they're using a criteria called the the annual mean household income. And the plan is laid out to provide grants to cities which are either below at or below 50% of the state average annual median household income, or below 75% of the state average annual median household income. And we don't fall into either of those categories. So there is a chance for a matching grant or a loan, but we're probably not eligible for a matching grant. We might be eligible for a zero interest or low interest loan, providing we qualify. And it looks like we're probably not going to qualify, but we can qualify if we can do something with San Antonio in conjunction with their situation, because I suspect that San Antonio is at or below 75% of the state annual median household income. And that qualifies the city to get a partial grant for some of this money, and we might be able to participate if we can do something with the city of San Antonio. Otherwise, I don't see a real good avenue for us to get any of the money. But we need to proceed as though we're going to get some, and we have to ask, because for sure we won't get it if we don't ask.
So again, we fall into the donut hole.
Sir?
We again fall into the donut hole.
Yeah.
We have too much, but not enough to fix our problems.
So, Mr. McCormick's right, we looked into it as far as criteria and eligibility.
Right.
I've had one of our engineers who are working on the Mimosa Cremeria drainage project and thought maybe that would be a great project. But again, they've done a preliminary review of the funding available, and they were gonna put something together, so I can provide it to y'all, but basically the housing.
Who's putting that together?
I had RPS put something together.
Okay, sorry, okay.
Because they're doing the Mimosa Cremeria and thought that would be a great project. But again, that starts talking about housing and income, that we were a little too high for the criteria side of that. But as Mr. McCormick said, there are possibilities with engaging San Antonio, possibly to partner, which might help bring up our eligibility criteria to gain some dollars for our project.
So let me ask the question on something like that. What is the likelihood of getting with San Antonio? You know, seems like we're always kind of behind the curve on something like this. And it's a learning curve. It really is, and it's been that way, and it'll continue to be that way and going forward, and I know that. The biggest concern I have, the one that San Antonio may or may not be interested in, is the Carrollwood. Along Lock Hill Selma is the biggest issue, and San Antonio should rightly be working on that with us, of course. What's the likelihood of moving this forward with them for these monies that are available, in your opinion, Ryan?
I'd have to ask them as far as the time frame of when these funds become available, based on the conception or the idea of partnering with San Antonio to fix Lock Hill for the drainage. You know, I've been targeting hopefully we can get on the next bond with them.
Right.
But typically projects like this need shovel ready, like design done, ready to go, based on the time in that the money is allocated.
The majority of this project could be in San Antonio, though. That's the only thing. So I guess what I'm gonna say is on something like this, I would like to encourage Ryan. I'd like to mandate Ryan to bring this up to San Antonio. The more of a thorn in the side we are, of a nice thorn, by the way, in this case, the better, or the more we squeak, I guess. The more San Antonio would be looking to respond to us, and this may or may not be successful, but I think we should be reaching out to them again for something like this. Would be my thought. I'm open to ideas. I'd like to direct Ryan to do that as part of one of our committee recommendations. but that's open to discussion. So any thoughts from anybody?
I just see that area on Lock Hill Selma between Wurzbach and, I don't know, it's George Road or by Elm Creek, right on.
Or West Avenue?
Well, it's on Lock Hill Selma, but it's, I guess Elm Creek?
Creek.
Yeah. So, but on Lock Hill Selma, you know how they built up Lock Hill Selma 20 feet or so? They made it.
Oh, yeah. As you get to Chavano Park and stuff, or Elm Creek's on the, yes.
So, I mean, I think that's a similar.
As you cross over Wurzbach, as you pass Wurzbach.
Right. So, but that was a big project they did on Lock Hill Selma. So I think something similar is probably needed.
Which is a push to San Antonio again.
Right. So I'm just saying they've done it before
Right.
on Lock Hill Selma. So,
They couldn't do it again.
right.
So is that a motion? The motion that Mr. Rapley, that we suggest to Mr. Rapley that he proceed with negotiations with San Antonio, is that what you're moving?
That's my motion, in the essence of the motion, yes.
So do we need a second for that?
We do. George, any thoughts on that?
What exact location are you talking about doing this?
What I'm referring to is the stormwater runoff that comes into Castle Hills, crossing over Lock Hill Selma, essentially between West Avenue and Blanco. Essentially that section, mainly Carrollwood and
Manton, North Manton.
Manton. Yeah, those are the two biggies. And just continue to help move them forward to help us.
Yeah, I'm definitely all for it.
Jack?
And they're already part of the CIP. I believe that Carrollwood project is in year 5 of your CIP, Ryan. So it's out there somewhere in the future, which suggests that maybe the timing's okay.
I mean, it was the larger piece, so again, when we have the Banyan project, that's addressing two focal points of that watershed.
Right.
The main watershed was fixing Carrollwood, which was at a higher cost than what these two. So just real quick, that the one for Tuesday night, the Banyan Glen Tower takes care of those 2 phases within the watershed. And the probable cost was higher for Carrollwood from Lock Hill down to connect. So that was the bigger piece of fixing. But it would be an idea to take the probable cost, or if money or funding was available, to apply it to that Lock Hill project. Because again, I think if we're able to partner with San Antonio and alleviate all drainage and have it go underground, that's gonna take care of all the streets that go south
Right.
down into Castle Hills.
It'll help a lot. Now, how's the MOU coming along? That would probably be a necessary piece.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
application
we'll
thing.
cover that agenda.
Oh, okay.
Well, there's no relevance on the MOU for that particular project. This is for the other one. But at some point, if we get to an agreement with San Antonio, that would have to be developed. But if the idea that we could partner with them on their 2022 bond, again, you'd have to break down who's paying for designing, because we'd have to design our side, make sure either our engineers, their engineers, or one engineer is communicating and coming up with that cost and design. And then part of it is the way it works over there is they have a bond committee, and so that would have to be prioritized by that particular bond committee under drainage. They break it up in drainage, quality of life projects, and so on. So that's a whole nother piece to that, which would take a little bit more from like the mayor and the elected officials to really push at that point as well.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to direct Mr. Rapoli to reach out to San Antonio for these, to see what opportunities there are for these rainy day fund monies that are coming from the state of Texas. There's no more discussion on that. I'd like to call for the vote on that. So all in favor of directing Ryan to reach out to them? Okay, unanimous. Ryan? Make it so.
Can I mention one other thing?
Go ahead.
it appears that this money was pretty much dedicated to some specific target areas. When the whole idea came out last year to talk about it and put it on the budget. The fact is that Texas Water Development Board had already published their guidelines last year, and that when the money was passed in November, the project went into effect January 1st, and the deadline for applications is April, for whatever that's worth. So that makes it damn near impossible for us to get a joint project through with San Antonio between now and April and to have something accomplished on it. So what that means is that if we want to be in on any future projects, we need to start negotiating with San Antonio to get these things in front of their attention and to have them deal with them on an ongoing basis rather than to wait until the money is already appropriated and pretty well spent before it comes out.
Skip, I think you're right, but I think if we don't ask, we won't get.
Absolutely.
And I think with Ryan staying in front of them and us encouraging Ryan to do that is only beneficial for everybody. So I think that's the value here is, hey, it's one more way we're reaching out to San Antonio for the good community of Castle Hills, so.
And it does involve the mayor too, and I know he's had some discussions with the mayor of San Antonio as well. So
Good, Ryan, thank you.
it's kind of working at both ends.
Yes, and that's what we got to do. That's what we got to get this city to move to, so. Okay, Skip, thank you. Ryan? Okay, let's go ahead and move forward. Agenda item number 5, that's an update by the city manager in regards to the ongoing MOU activities with San Antonio for street maintenance projects. Ryan?
Well, two things. The MOU that we talk about with possibly partnering with them at some point for the traffic improvements on West and Jackson Keller. So as I mentioned, I had facilitated to get all the data from TxDOT to COSA San Antonio last month. And so they're reviewing the viability of that data.
Okay.
And I'm hoping, they said, give us a couple months to look at it.
Typical.
I know.
Yeah.
But at least they got all the data. We didn't have to pay for it. It was already paid for by a large company across the street. And we were able to utilize that data at no cost, provide it to San Antonio and their TCI and traffic, and they promised they would get back to me within a couple months after they reviewed the data to see if it's a viability, or to review the viability of this project and even moving forward.
Okay, okay.
And then,
So I take it
Street
it wouldn't help to prod them anymore at this point. Let's let that gel.
no, I plan to, I know when I'm gonna circle back.
Okay,
Let's put it
perfect.
that way.
Perfect. Thank you, Ryan.
And we've had good, productive meetings with them, and the mayor was in on one of those with the District 1 Chief of Staff over there from Mr. Trevino's office. And so, like I said before, the councilman's on board with getting that project done if it does have viability and legs and is a good project for the city of San Antonio side. Doesn't mean at some point we can't fix the West 410 corridor ourselves if necessary, but again, it comes down to funding. And as Mr. McCormick knows, that we were trying to reach a threshold for MPO based on the monetary. Real quick, the street maintenance, I had a meeting this week. Actually, we did the interlocal agreement with the county.
Okay.
The county's locking down multiple vendors. Obviously, now that this case, we don't have to go back out for bid. We just utilize one of their contractors based on what type of sealant or coat we're going to put down that calls for our street maintenance program. And I've been told that based on scheduling of streets that would be done within the county and us being on the schedule, that we could start as early as late March with some of the streets moving forward.
That's moving forward.
And that's with the 20 to 25 possible streets out of the 400,000 that was in the adopted budget.
Okay.
And so different streets have slightly different applications for the street seal, for the seal coat. And so the different contractors / vendors use the different types, so they'll be selected based on what the engineers have called for under the street maintenance program. But we could start, like I said, as far as late March on some of our streets.
So as I recall, just for everyone's information, if a contractor gets contracts with Bear County, they're obligated to do work for us as well, since we are on that contract per se. Is that
Yes, the idea of doing ILA was to, the larger volume and get better pricing. So we would just be springboarding off their vendors.
But they can't say, no, we're not gonna do your streets as well if we choose them.
No. We're just tied to a schedule that, like I said, they may do some county streets first and then come in and do Castle Hills, or they may do Castle Hills and some of the other suburban cities that they have. We're not the only city working with the county on this, so.
Right.
It's getting essentially more bang for the buck on this, and I've seen the list of the contractors and know a couple of them who do street maintenance within San Antonio, and so I know they come in and get out of there pretty quick.
So what is the timing on releasing, what streets are gonna be done?
In all, there was 32 streets based on their PCI or OCI score that were in the street maintenance, and I think the total was about 520-some thousand to do all 32 streets. And I won't rehash, what happened in the budget, but 400,000 was already dedicated. Potentially getting new revenue might have helped
I know we
with
shot
that.
ourselves in the foot, we all know that.
And so regardless of the fact, there's 400,000 in the budget to do 20 to hopefully 25 streets.
Okay.
As a result of this meeting this week, Mr. Harada got the streets that are gonna need some work to come in and do, a couple repairs or base failures in some of those streets.
Before the seal coat?
Before the seal coat comes in. So Rick's gonna have that list. We'll have a contractor come in and start doing some of that prep work, repairing a few of those streets that need to be repaired, because when the contractor comes in, as you know, they get in and get out.
Okay. And the only thing I would say is if you could give us the timing of when it's appropriate, once Rick figures that out.
Yeah, I would provide,
Love to see that. That's gonna be a good
providing
amount.
that to city council first, and then,
Right. Okay, thank you, Ryan. Okay. Agenda item number 7, members' opportunity to make any announcements. Bernard? Okay. George?
Not necessarily announcements, but just a couple questions. Mr. Rapley, Ryan, did you talk with San Antonio about their lot there on Carrollwood, about doing anything with it to help hold some water and dig it out? And
yes, I've had a couple meetings with the assistant director of stormwater. And they apparently in the past have looked at the viability of doing that. And I was asking if what San Antonio could do and if it would be beneficial. And I'm hearing different stories that even our engineers who are doing our projects now, who did the master drainage study, said that even putting a little dent in that won't make a difference based on the volume of water coming down Carrollwood. And they have to look at on the city of San Antonio side, do they want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to do some type of maintenance or basin, and it not even put a dent on the water that comes down Carrollwood? So I've asked them to look into that, and I have not heard back just yet, but it didn't seem like a possibility based on them putting money into that. And you think that just deepening that would hold water, but again, the numbers or the hydrological numbers that they've been provided from our engineers who've looked at Carrollwood, who did the master drainage study, say that just the volume of water is too much. It won't make a dent. And at the end of the day, that's why we need the drainage inlets or underground lock hill to remedy that situation.
If I can comment on that, I had the opportunity to look at these numbers years ago before Ryan got here. And when I worked with Klotz on it, I had them calculate it out. Yeah, it won't impact, the true events that happen that really impact us, it won't impact it at all. It was so minuscule, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but it's just so much water. It's so much water coming in so fast that you just can't help it. And focusing on getting to San Antonio is the way to move forward on something like this and get that water diverted properly.
I had another interesting idea while I've been sitting here thinking about how we can, make Castle Hills more identifiable. By any chance, could we put something in the median of Northwest Military at either end? Maybe something, a vertical sign, since there's not a lot of space there, that would the state of Highway Department, Texas Highway Department allow us to do something like that?
Like a welcome to Castle Hill sign,
Yeah.
like they do?
You just have to provide them the plans and they approve it. They have a criteria for doing those monuments for every city. So it's a matter of putting that together and giving it to them. It's not that
It's just another idea, and, it's, definitely people would see it if it's in the center of the road.
But TxDOT has to approve it in their right of way there, and they have certain criteria. So as long as we meet those criteria and have the funding, it's not a big deal.
I think, wasn't that something like that suggested in the TMAU report too? That we brand those intersections, we
Yes,
brand that?
there
I
is.
think it says even, we need to do it.
There are 5 locations listed in the 2006 TAMU report that says either where we should put them. And I don't think we've used up all of those yet. We've got 2.
Yeah, we just
and they're
never
not
have.
even on the locations that the TAMU report suggested. So there are places where we should put them. Yeah, there is on the north side at Jackson Keller, at
Weston.
not west, but Northwest Military and Lock Hill, where that island is. There's a space there where a sign can be put in that says you're leaving. There's some right-of-way that we have for public access on the Boy Scout camp side where we might be able to put a sign if we chose to do that. So that's something we could do there. On the south side at 410 where the access comes off to Northwest Military, that's a place where you can put a sign that says entering Castle Hills. There's already an island in the median there where you make that curve up onto Northwest Military. On the south side, you're looking at Weston, Jackson Keller, and Blanco and Jackson Keller, where you might be able to put up signs in the public access right-of-way if there's space. We haven't looked to see if there's space yet. But yeah, there are places.
Okay, that's all I have.
All right, George, thank you. Jack? Okay. I have no announcements this time. I'm going to skip. Do you have any announcements?
Nope.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, last agenda item is to have a meeting and set a meeting. So looking at the schedule in February, the 2 dates that come to mind would be either February 8th, which would be before the council meeting, or February the 15th, which would be after the February 11th council meeting. February 15th actually does fall the day after February 14th, which may or may not be an issue for me. I have to take care of my bride, so. So I'm going to make the recommendation that we meet again on February the 8th if we think we could have some of that park information or commons information available. That'd be the only caveat that I want to throw out there. So open to discussion or thoughts from anybody here? Jump in.
I'm available.
Sounds good to me. He said, what he said was he could do it in a month.
Right?
It's roughly a month.
A month, okay. Bernard? Skip, are you available on February the 8th?
Yeah.
Okay. Brian, do you think that my caveat could be addressed and you could have some preliminaries for us? Okay, good enough. All right,
Mention one thing.
sure.
Since we're having it on February 8th, that's going to be too late to add something to the council agenda at that time. Can I suggest that if we're going to do it on February 8th, we go ahead and plan now to put something on the council agenda for the February 11th meeting so that we can get Mr. Gregory to make a presentation about what we're proposing with the comments, if we want to do that? Can we make some kind of a generic entry into the agenda so that if we decide we want him to talk about it at that point and set up a public hearing or something of that sort, that we can do it?
Skip, I think that would be, I think that would be an appropriate thing to do. I mean, but we're still in the, essentially, in my opinion, the infantile stages of doing this. And so as long as it's generic and we're throwing these ideas out there, because you don't want to, the problem we run into is once you present something, everybody thinks it's set in stone, which we want to make sure we tell people it's not. That's the only concern I would have.
The, agenda,
Yeah, that would be on the February agenda for sure.
You think?
So I would hope so. If you're able to get that taken
And
care of.
we need to make that decision today, I think, if we want to put it on the February agenda. There won't be a meeting in time to put it on the agenda.
Let's do that in the Parks meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, all right, so motion is that we meet on February the 8th at 10 a.m., City Hall, Council Chambers. Do I have a second? I don't know who was faster. Okay, George, okay. Okay, all in favor? February 8th it is, all right.
Who seconded?
George. Okay, it is now 12:08, and we are adjourned.